Debt isn't just numbers on a balance sheet, it's power. Every dollar you borrow, whether it's a mortgage or a quick credit card swipe, is a promise. And the one who holds those promises holds your future. I once met a man in his 40s, a small shop owner. He told me, I didn't realize when I lost my freedom until every decision I made was about paying my debt. That line stayed with me because he wasn't talking about money. He was talking about control over his own life. In every financial crisis, the same pattern repeats. Ordinary people lose their homes and jobs, while big corporations get rescued. Ever wonder why? Because the system is designed to protect the lenders, not the borrowers. And the irony is, most of us live our whole lives inside that system, never realizing we're being controlled by it. I'm not saying debt is evil. Debt can be a powerful tool, if you know how to use it. But if you don't, it will use you. So before you sign any loan, ask yourself, am I buying opportunity or selling my freedom? That answer could change your entire life. In 1971, the year that seemed ordinary, the world's financial order quietly changed forever. President Richard Nixon announced that the US dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. With that single statement, money ceased to be tied to anything tangible. It now existed only because we believed it did. Imagine this. Every dollar once represented a piece of real gold in a vault. Now it's just a promise. That it has value because we all agree it does. When gold disappeared from the equation, trust became the new collateral. And when trust could be created with a keystroke, all limits vanished. From that moment on, central banks discovered a new kind of magic. They could create money out of thin air. Governments borrowed to spend. Companies borrowed to expand. People borrowed to live. The entire world entered a new cycle of growth, built not on productivity, but on debt. As one finance professor once said, after 1971, we stopped defining value by gold and started defining it by optimism. And maybe that's why every time confidence shakes, the markets tremble. Because in a world where money is printed from belief, when belief collapses, there's nothing left to back us. Debt is a double-edged sword. It can open doors to prosperity or cut down the very hand that wields it. Governments borrow to build bridges, companies to expand factories, families to chase their dreams. But every loan comes with a clock, and when profits fall short, dreams turn into burdens. I once worked with a small business owner who told me, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of the phone call from the bank at the end of the month. He laughed when he said it, but it wasn't a joke. Debt never sleeps. Even when you're exhausted, it keeps counting the days. Throughout history, empires haven't fallen because they ran out of gold or land. They fell because they borrowed too much to maintain the illusion of strength. Leverage can lift you high, but when the wind shifts, it pulls you down faster than gravity. Debt isn't bad if you control it. But when you start borrowing just to survive instead of to grow, that invisible rope begins to tighten. And the scariest part? Most people don't feel it until they can't breathe anymore. The hardest times often produce the greatest ideas and the people brave enough to build them. When giant corporations struggle to stay afloat, it's the small entrepreneurs, the ones who adapt quickly, learn fast, and take smart risks, who rise. I once worked with a startup founder during the 2020 crisis. While big companies froze, he spotted an opportunity. Everyone's stuck at home, but they still need connection. He built a small, user-friendly virtual meeting platform, and a year later, it was acquired for tens of millions. He told me, a crisis doesn't kill businesses. It reveals who's really listening to what the world needs. He was right. When the world talks about recession, the successful talk about adaptation. They know that when money gets tight, real value becomes priceless. And while others wait for normal to return, they create a new normal of their own. Sometimes financial freedom doesn't begin when you make more money, but when you learn to stand steady in the storm. If you study history long enough, you'll see that the world runs in cycles. And debt is humanity's oldest rhythm. It starts with optimism. Governments borrow to stimulate growth, businesses to expand, people to live better. Everything works until the tide rises too high. Then comes denial. We hear the same phrases. It's just temporary. The market will fix itself. But debt doesn't disappear, it's just covered by more debt. And eventually the system breaks, not because of money, but because of lost trust. When faith collapses, the structure crumbles. Then, like clockwork, society rebuilds. With a new system, a new currency, a new story to believe in. You can't stop the wave, but you can learn to surf it. Understanding this cycle keeps you calm when others panic, and grounded when others get greedy. Because every collapse clears the way for a handful of people who stay awake, stay steady, and quietly build the next era. In 2008, the world learned a brutal lesson about greed and blind confidence. They called it a housing crisis, but it wasn't about houses. It was about a tower of debt built on debt. Banks turned debt into a product. They wrapped mortgages in shiny labels called safe investments, sold them to investors, and leveraged them 30 to 1. When just a few homeowners defaulted, the entire tower, this debt pyramid, collapsed. A friend in New York once told me, "I lost my home, but my tax dollars saved the bank that took it." That's the irony. Governments printed trillions to save the system, while millions of families lost everything. And we realized debt itself wasn't the problem. It was how people used it to hide risk. 2008 wasn't just a collapse, it was a wake-up call. When profit becomes the only goal, ethics is the first casualty. And when greed is fueled by leverage, collapse is just a matter of time. Yet, for those who understood that crisis wasn't the end, it was a new beginning. A reminder that real value is built on truth, not illusion. If you look across history, every empire that borrowed too much faced the same ending. Only the disguise changed. Some tried to pay back, honestly, rarely. Most chose inflation, printing money to quietly shrink their debt. It sounds harmless, but it's really a hidden tax on ordinary people. I met a retired woman in California who said, "I saved my whole life for $200,000, but a few years later it wasn't enough to live on." That's inflation. Silent, invisible, merciless. No one knocks on your door to take your money. Prices do it for them. Others choose default or restructuring, the painful route. Greece did that during the Eurozone crisis, and millions lost jobs and pensions. But sometimes collapse is the only way to cleanse a broken system. No matter the method, the result is always the same. Someone pays. And almost always, it's not the powerful. It's the ordinary people paying with their futures. $300 trillion. That's not just a number. It's the mortgage on humanity's future. To picture it, if you added up everything the world produces in a year, goods, services, labor, it still wouldn't cover even a quarter of that debt. We've borrowed 4 times more from tomorrow than what we can make today. And the truth is, no one knows how to stop. In the US, spending continues as if debt were just an abstract figure. In Japan, public debt exceeds 200% of GDP, yet people still cling to the illusion of stability. In China, local governments and state-owned firms are sitting on ticking time bombs of shadow debt. And in Europe, from Italy to Greece, nations are still paying for decades of borrowed prosperity. But the real crisis isn't financial anymore, it's psychological. We've lived with debt so long that we think it's normal. Students borrow to study, families to buy homes, seniors to afford healthcare. Debt has become not just an economic tool, but part of our social identity. And when an entire generation grows up believing, borrow now, pay later, we create a spiral where the only way out is to borrow again. That's not just a financial burden, it's a crisis of faith, where we trade the future for the comfort of today. When the economy drowns in debt, most people think starting a business is crazy. But that's when opportunity shines brightest. Consumers don't stop buying, they just buy differently. They look for things that save money, bring peace, and make them feel safe in uncertain times. A friend of mine started a business during the 2020 crisis. Instead of selling luxury, she taught people how to manage spending and live simply. It began as a small online course, but within a year it became a community of hundreds of thousands, people wanting to live with less but live better. That's when I realized when people lose faith in systems, they rediscover faith in themselves. In times of high debt, the greatest value you can offer isn't luxury, it's peace of mind. If you're building a business, ask yourself, does what I create save someone time, money, or worry? Because in a world of fear, people don't want more things. They want reasons to feel safe. And that's the richest market of all, for those who truly listen. Politics, at its core, is the art of delaying collapse. And debt is the tool that makes it possible. When governments need money but fear raising taxes, they borrow. When they want to stimulate the economy without upsetting voters, they borrow again. Debt buys time, comfort, and the illusion that everything's fine. But the bill always arrives later. As one economist said, every time a government spends a dollar it hasn't earned, it takes a dollar from children who haven't been born. That line hit me hard. Because it's true, no one knocks on your door for national debt, but you still pay it through higher prices, hidden taxes, and rising interest rates. The tragedy is that politicians can make promises, spend freely, and retire before the check comes due. Debt at the national level is like a lavish dinner charged to the next generation's credit card. And we, workers, taxpayers, dreamers, are the ones left to pick up the tab. That's why understanding debt isn't just economics. It's about responsibility, leadership, and the kind of future we're leaving behind. In 1944, as the smoke of World War II still hung in the air, global leaders met in a quiet town in New Hampshire, Bretton Woods. There, they rewrote the rules of global finance. The U.S., holding two-thirds of the world's gold, offered a simple deal. Every currency will be tied to the dollar, and the dollar will be tied to gold. And just like that, the US dollar became the anchor of the world economy. At first, it seemed like stability. Every nation trusted that their money was backed by gold. But in truth, it was backed by America's power and reputation, things that can't be weighed or stored. As one historian said, after Bretton Woods, the world stopped relying on gold and started relying on Washington's promise. And he was right. When America thrives, the world feels safe. When America stumbles, from Vietnam to 2008, the whole system shakes. Since that day, the dollar hasn't just been money. It's been a symbol of dominance. A nation can lose its gold, but as long as the world believes in the dollar, the U.S. remains the central bank of the planet. And that's why, whenever that belief trembles, the entire world trembles with it. It's hard to resist the allure of easy debt when interest rates are low. Money feels weightless, and everyone thinks it'll last forever. Governments borrow to spend, companies to grow, and we borrow to live a little better. Everything feels fine until the music stops. Remember that first 0% interest offer from the bank? It sounds like a gift, but it's a trap wrapped in a smile. When rates rise, those debts show their true face. What once helped you move forward becomes a chain holding you back. A man in Texas once told me, I didn't think I owed too much until the bank raised my rate by 2%. Suddenly, I couldn't sleep. His story isn't unique. It's the story of millions. When money is cheap, we think we're in control. When it's expensive, we realize it was in control all along. Easy debt is like a sweet cocktail, smooth at first, but the hangover lasts for years. And when it hits, families, businesses, and nations all feel the pain. That's why wise people don't ask, how much can I borrow? They ask, how much can I handle when everything changes? We live in a world where financial belief is traded like a commodity. Stocks, tokens, contracts, numbers flashing on screens, all promising a brighter tomorrow. But belief can't be eaten. It can't be touched. If there's one timeless lesson from every crisis, it's this: real value never collapses. Real value isn't in promises. It's in creating something useful, tangible, human. I once mentored a group of startup students. They asked, "How do we raise capital fast?" I smiled and said, "That's the wrong question. Ask this instead. What real problem are we solving and for whom? When you create genuine value, money finds you. If you only chase money, you'll forever be pulled by the system like a kite in the wind." This truth applies to everyone: founders, investors, or everyday workers. Invest in knowledge, skills, and tangible assets. The things that can't evaporate with a single headline on Wall Street. We don't need to run from the system. We need to understand it. Only when you know what's real and what's illusion can you build something that stands firm in the storm. Debt, at its core, isn't the enemy. It's just a tool, like fire. It can warm you or burn you. The problem isn't the flame, it's the hand that holds it. In today's world, debt is inevitable. No one buys a home, starts a business, or grows without leverage. But the real question is, are you controlling debt, or is debt controlling you? I once met a young entrepreneur who sank into hundreds of thousands in credit card debt trying to grow fast. When I asked what he learned, he said, "If you don't understand cash flow, you'll spend your life paying for your mistakes." He started over, and this time, every dollar borrowed had purpose and multiplied in value. He didn't avoid debt, he mastered it. Smart people don't fear borrowing. They fear borrowing blindly. Debt only becomes a prison when you use it to fill emotional gaps instead of building real value. Remember, in a world where money can be printed with a keystroke, understanding debt is understanding freedom. Because when you truly see how the system works, who lends, who's rescued, and who pays, you gain the power to stand outside the chaos and say, "No, not this time." When the world drowns in debt, don't ask, "How do I escape it?" Ask, "How can I use debt and still stay free?" Because in every crisis, those who understand the system survive, and those who don't end up paying for someone else's mistakes.